Welcome to episode 4 of Made Men. This is Paul Whitcomb with my fellow mobologist, Mr. Ray Franz. And we're joined today by our good friend, Mr. Larry. You were with us on episode 3. Do just a quick introduction of who you are for those of us who were not here for episode 3.
Thanks, guys. My name is Larry Henry. I'm a reporter now. I'm a reporter for Gambling.com, which covers sports betting and casinos and so forth in North America. And I write a monthly column for the Mob Museum called The Mob and Pop Culture, the Mob Museum in Las Vegas. A long time experience in Las Vegas as a reporter in Reno and Las Vegas. So that's sort of a thumbnail sketch.
You also have a Facebook page, which our viewers would be very interested in. How can they find you?
Yeah, please jump in. Send a friend request. It's, not a friend request to join. It's Las Vegas Mafia History. It's a great site. I think you guys are on it. A journalist, people whose family members were involved in the underworld. It's law enforcement people, and there's some real lively, interesting discussions. Just like on the pages you guys are involved with in Chicago. I think those are the sort of the platforms now where you can get a lot of really interesting conversation, learn a lot of things.
For sure. We have a couple of questions right off the bat. The first one is we left on the question of Chicago pouring money into Las Vegas. This was hundreds of millions of dollars, Larry. They didn't just pull up with a truck and dump dirty cash from strip clubs and drugs and all these things. How did the Chicago outfit manage to pour all this money into Las Vegas with this veneer of respectability?
Well, Las Vegas, as you guys know, was an open town. It's sort of like the pre-Las Vegas is like Hot Springs. You know, you could be Al Capone, you could be Ben Siegel, you could be Frank Costello. They would all go to Hot Springs. Nobody killed anybody. Everybody went to the racetrack at Oaklawn in Hot Springs. Same thing with Las Vegas. It was an open town. And you could be from New York, people from Detroit, from, Milwaukee, people from Chicago, New York, involved in Las Vegas. Chicago people early on, from the Rosellis to the Giancanas and people like that, saw an opportunity in Las Vegas and were able to work their way into key casinos like the Stardust and places like that became really big skimming opportunities for Midwestern mob families, not just Chicago, the Savellas in Kansas City and people like that, interconnected. They would funnel money here and there, but they just saw an opportunity and got into key casinos through some of their envoys in Las Vegas dating back to the early days and got involved in the key prominent casinos. Even up at Lake Tahoe, by the way, Sam Giancana was involved. I think we talked a little bit about the Cal Neva up at Lake Tahoe. There's an effort now today to try to get that casino revived. It was right in the border of California and Nevada. That was Giancana. So that goes way back. So it wasn't just in Las Vegas. Throughout Nevada, Chicago bosses up in Chicago saw the significance of the revenue coming out of Las Vegas and Nevada, period, and sent some envoys, some powerful envoys who, with political connections, with casino connections, were able to work their way into Las Vegas and take over control of casinos.
Larry, I got a quick question that some people at home might have. You mentioned Las Vegas is an open city and other towns could have interest there. Yet Chicago found itself in charge of looking over everyone's interests. How is it, in your and Paul's opinion, that Chicago was able to assert that control over looking over everyone's interests in Vegas?
Well, I think there are two primary factors. One is that Chicago held sway of everything west of the Mississippi, including Milwaukee, which wasn't technically west. And I think they had the connections. They had Johnny Roselli, who had been on the West Coast for all these years. They had Marshall Cafano out there. Sam Giancana was heavily connected out there from the 30s. And New York didn't have the connections out there politically. They didn't have the muscle. And Tony Accardo, in my opinion, sat down with the commission and said, Vegas is ours. We'll give you this new thing called Atlantic City, which is opening up for gambling. It's right on your doorstep. It's right across the river in New Jersey. We'll stay away, and you let us supervise what's going on in Las Vegas. And it was a brilliant truce. Did not work out so well for the New York families, but it sure worked out well for Chicago. What do you think, Larry?
I think that's absolutely right. And keep in mind, too, Chicago had as you say, with Milwaukee, with Kansas City, you know, the Savellas had people placed inside the Tropicana. And then you also had connections through the Teamsters Union from Dorfman, from the Savellas in Kansas City. Those Teamsters connections, also through Hoffa, helped finance construction of the casinos in Las Vegas. And Chicago was intimately connected through the Teamsters and how that money was allocated in building projects like casinos in Las Vegas. And when I say Chicago, I'm including, you know, this is sort of a broad sweep, and I know there are territorial disputes among historians and so forth about where was Milwaukee, where was Kansas City, where was Chicago. So sort of that Midwestern group, which I think arguably was the umbrella was Chicago, through the Teamsters. I think, guys, unless I'm misreading this, I think that also played a big factor, because that's where the money came from to build those casinos in Las Vegas. And we talked a moment ago about you know, that era portrayed in the movie Casino. Argent Corp, which took over 4 prominent casinos in Las Vegas in the early 70s, which led to Rosenthal being placed in charge of overseeing those casinos, to Alan Glenn, the guy who ran Argent Corp from San Diego. Teamsters money, facilitated by Milwaukee, by Chicago, allowed Glick and Argent to expand upon his operations in Las Vegas. That opened the door for people to come in, like Rosenthal, like Spilatro. That's where a lot of them really, I'm talking now, we're moving past the period where some of those early truces were made, but that's also pretty key in how Chicago got in. It was, you know, the money that was made available through the Teamsters that really opened that door. And Dorfman, let's don't forget, was extremely instrumental.
Without a doubt. I think if we go into the 60s and the fall of Sam Giancana, the beginning of a new era, Marshall Cafano was recalled, Johnny Roselli is getting older, he's a Giancana soldier anyway. Now we come to the end of the 60s, the early 70s, Joey Aiuppa is running things, and he sends Tony Spilatro to supervise Las Vegas. What kind of a change did that represent for organized crime in the city?
It was more of a violence era. Cafano had some back to that era, a little more rough edged. Roselli comes in under the Giancana umbrella and was a little more suave, a little more, you know, a political connector guy, sort of the way Costello was in New York, you know, worked the politicians, worked the golf courses and things like that. Then that era you're talking about, Paul, where I think it was 71 that Spilatro goes to Las Vegas. He gets a gift shop in Circus, gets his feet planted in Las Vegas, then has a jewelry store near where Circus still is, by the way, on Sahara. That jewelry store has been demolished. The gold rush. Gets a gang together from Chicago, mostly. There was a dirty cop from Las Vegas and things like that. But most of these members of his gang, called the Hole in the Wall gang, because they would knock a hole in homes, businesses, those sort of things, to go in and get the goods. These were pre-Ring doorbell days, you know, there weren't all these surveillance cameras and all that. That group, very rough-edged group, violent group, Frank Collada, Larry Newman, Matecki, it had that crowd. They came in to Las Vegas. We're talking the 70s now. Spilatro sits down with Frank Collada at the Gold Rush, a steakhouse, still there, by the way, which was near where the Gold Rush was. And they begin to put together this street racket crew.
Is that at the Golden Steer? Is that the place that you're talking about, Larry?
The Golden Steer?
Yeah.
What did I say? The Gold Rush?
The Gold Rush, yeah.
Yeah. So Collada comes. So they put this crew together, and they take over the street rackets. They begin to impose a street tax, prostitution, illegal bookies. You know, even though sports betting is legal in Nevada, you still, as you do today, even though it's legal in most states, there's still illegal bookies, because the legal bookies can't take bets on credit, you know, and that sort of thing. So they began to take over these street rackets, breaking into homes, breaking into businesses, and it got really violent in that era. And that's sort of what ushered in a different tone in Las Vegas. A lot of media attention. There were reporters like Ned Day, Jeff Garriman, Jane Ann Morrison, a lot of report. Ned Day, by the way, uh, uh, also had, from Milwaukee, but he also was very intimate with what was going on in Chicago. All those reporters began to focus intensive pressure on Spilatro, on Rosenthal, on that whole era. And so it really began to be a high profile. I think even to this day, there are people, because there was so much negative energy coming out of Las Vegas during the Rosenthal and Spilatro era, the era portrayed in the 1995 movie Casino. I think even to this day, there's sort of an image that the casino industry in general is a mobbed up, although because there are 1,000 plus casinos around the country now, tribal and commercial. They're owned by publicly traded companies or tribes. They're not mobbed up, but there still is an impression, I think, because of that era, that all of this sort of underworld vibe happens at casinos because it was rough. It was rough during that Spilatro and Rosenthal era.
And at the very tail end of that era, didn't the outfit even try to muscle into Indian casinos as well with the Rincon tribe in San Diego?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of activity down in Phoenix. Yeah, it was very active. But as I think I mentioned in the last episode, even into the 90s, Herbert Blitzstein was killed in 97. So it was going on for a long time. And you're always asked, does the mob still exist in Las Vegas? Because of corporate casinos, there are organized crime elements in Las Vegas as there are in Chicago now, and whether they're traditional organized crime, as in mafia, there's some presence, obviously. Different kinds of organized crime exist, but that sort of Chicago outfit era in Las Vegas really started. It was when Spilatro was killed in '86 with his brother out near the airport and buried in Indiana. Everybody, of course, knows that story. That's when it sort of began to lose its grip. And by then, the corporations were coming into Las Vegas and all that. So yeah, it was a lot. Even though you had Mo Dalitz, you had Ben Siegel in the early days, New York, you had Detroit, you had St. Louis at the Dunes and all that. A lot of people still see Las Vegas as a Chicago outfit town, even to this day.
Sure. And can we talk a little bit about the structure there? We had, of course, Tony Accardo in the 70s, which I have said before was really where Chicago was at the epicenter of organized crime in America. Joey Aiuppa, of course, the day-to-day boss. Joey Lombardo then supervising Spilatro as what I call Mr. Outside, and Rosenthal as Mr. Inside. What are the respective roles these two guys played?
Just that. I mean, Rosenthal was inside at the Stardust, not licensed to run casinos, but ran the Hacienda, where the Mandalay Bay is now. He ran the Marina, which is a part of the MGM Grand now, the hotel part, that little wing that stretches out to the west toward the Strip. That was part of the Marina. It's not a casino anymore. It's the MGM. The Stardust, and downtown the Fremont, which is still in operation, by the way. Publicly traded company owns it. But that was while Rosenthal was running those casinos. And by the way, as Jane Ann Morrison of the Las Vegas Review Journal later reported, was also an informant, federal informant for the FBI. While Rosenthal on the inside was running the casinos in the skim, on the outside, Spilatro had the street rackets, the hole in the wall gang, and they were rough and tumble, man. They were creating a lot of bad press for what was going on in Las Vegas, causing some heartache for the bosses up in Chicago. But it was the spotlight really started to be shined on what was happening through the media and public outrage about Mr. Outside and what was going on with the street rackets, culminating in the arrest at Bertha's, which was a jewelry store on Sahara, not far from where Rosenthal's car ended up blowing up, culminating in a break-in at this jewelry store that was busted. That really blew it all up. And so that trial, then you had Collada becoming an informant. You had, the Spalatros were killed. Then, but before that, a few years before that, the trials in Kansas City, which sent a lot of the mob bosses, the outfit bosses to prison. So I would say from the early 70s when Spalatro got in town, Rosenthal, 68, 69, something like that. Rosenthal got there, lived at the Trop for a while. Then he got involved, early 70s to when the Spalatros were killed, when those Kansas City trials occurred, the outfit bosses were thrown into prison. That period was when it all began to unravel. And by the way, some of that happened too in Kansas City at a pizzeria called the Villa Capri. It was bugged. There was a feud going on in Kansas City between syndicate members in Kansas City. So that was bugged by the FBI. Overheard on that surveillance, Cervella crime family members discussing people in Las Vegas that they had their thumb on that were skimming for them. That also blew it all open, Paul. Not only the trials in Kansas City and the Spalatro brothers being killed and all that, all those things led to the unraveling of the outfit's control in Las Vegas, but also that bugging, that surveillance audio at the Villa Capri, which by the way also has been demolished. I think it burned up. That also blew it all open. And while that was in Kansas City, that was all interconnected. Chicago, Kansas City, Milwaukee. So when that Villa Capri surveillance audio, those names they were code names for Rosenthal. He was seen as kind of a loco guy. He was crazy, drawing a lot of attention on himself, running this television show. Rosenthal was really too high profile, according to Kansas City, Chicago people. Then in a home that the Cervella family's relative lived in, named Marlowe, Josephine Marlowe, Carl Thomas goes out with Joe Agosto from the Tropicana to Kansas City. They have a conversation in this bugged home in Kansas City about all the skim. How do you skim? Here's how it's done and all that. So all those things combined, I think, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that whole series of events, those were in the 70s, those buggings in Kansas City, the trials in Kansas City, the Lefty Rosenthal's car being blown up in 1982. Before then, Rosenthal being on TV, all those things led to a lot of focus on what was wrong in Las Vegas with organized crime's control of casinos that just brought a lot of heat onto Las Vegas.
So for that 15-year period there, Larry, wouldn't you say that what's portrayed in the book and the film Casino was really quite accurate as to what was going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it was so Nicholas Pileggi had been, as you guys know, the guy who wrote the book, had been an Associated Press reporter in New York for 15, 16 years, going back to the 50s, knew a lot of the mob figures, had written Wise Guy, which became Goodfellas, the movie Goodfellas, then was looking for a new project and saw some stories in the Las Vegas Sun and elsewhere about what was going on at the Stardust and wrote the book, which sort of simultaneously with Martin Scorsese working on the script. And the movie came out while the names were changed for the movie. That was what was going on in Las Vegas.
I have a couple quick questions about the possible scope of the skim. I read that it may have been one of the earlier skim trials, 79 or 81, you correct me if I'm wrong, but during a 5-year period when the government was looking at the Argent properties, just their coin cabinets alone were skimmed for $15 million a year over 5 years. So that's just their quarter and dollar cabinets. Is there any number, have you guys heard of like what the scam took over the course of 15, 20, 30 years?
What was the what was the casino you were saying that was at?
The 5 Argent properties, just their coin cabinets were bringing in 5 million a year. So if that was just over 15 million over 5 years, and that's just their coin cabinets, what were all of their properties and the entire casinos getting skimmed for? Is there a number out there?
I think it's massive. Different numbers are tossed around. I think in those trials, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think even when Carl Thomas was convicted, wasn't it like 240 or something like that coming out of just the trop, right? I may be wrong about that, but I think it's limitless. I don't know if there's ever been a pinned down number. You guys may have a better sense for that than I do, whether any specific, but because candidly, stolen money,
You never know.
you never know.
Well, I think that Ayupa was convicted of skimming only 2 million, but that's all that was proven at the trial, which was 199 million more than they needed to prove to send him to prison. But we certainly would agree that there's no way to know where all that money went. It certainly kept Chicago fat and happy for a very long time.
There is no way to know, and that's just Las Vegas. I mean, this was happening in Hot Springs, it was happening in Florida, it was happening all over the place. Up in northern Kentucky, as you guys know, across the Ohio River from Cincinnati, that Newport Covington area was a real hotbed of organized crime activity, including people from Chicago. They were skimming from backroom joints there. Who knows? Who knows? It kept them fat and happy for a long time. Even back, so the Fremont, one of the ones that Argent had control of in the 70s, before then it was opened up 56, 57, something like that. It was a real mobbed up place even before Argent got control of it. There was a woman named Ida Devine from Hot Springs, married a guy, Devine, and moved out to Las Vegas. She took money, skimmed money from casinos, collected it at the Fremont, took it down to the train station, which, as you guys know, is a couple of blocks away. Now it's where the Plaza is. Used to be called the Union Plaza, the Plaza Casino, right there by Circa. That used to be the train station. She would walk from the Fremont, bag loads of money, get on the train, take different routes, go through Hot Springs, sometimes go through Chicago, the FBI tracked her, down to South Florida for Meyer Lansky. And he would dole it out to. So yeah, the skimming, gosh, I mean, that I mean, it would be a great story, be a great book. How much money was skimmed?
Well, let's not forget Virginia Hill also carried those suitcases back to Chicago in the early years. She was entrusted with that. She may have been the most trusted female person in the Chicago outfit. I'd hesitate to call her a member, but she certainly had an awful lot of contacts.
She was mob adjacent.
There you go. Very mob adjacent. And then in later years.
And our friend Gary Jenkins, who has the Gangland on our website, and Gary's a great guy, former Kansas City intelligence detective, attorney, has several books out, has a great video documentary. Gary, and I wish I could remember the number, but Gary's got in his documentary, I think, and it's got a great book called Leaving Vegas, which gets into the whole skimming issue. The person who was the courier, who would bring money from Las Vegas to Kansas City to be dispensed to Chicago and elsewhere, portioned out, would stick it into literally the inner lining of his jacket and just carry it that way, in addition to suitcase. So one time he got busted, and I forget the amount. I wish I could remember the amount, like 70,000 in his pocket and 70,000. I forgot the number. But then remember, that led to Rosenthal going to Kansas City and threatening Savella. I'm sorry, not threatening Savella, threatening Glick, who had control of the Argent Corp casino. So who knows how much money they were carrying on the inside, to getting on the plane with money stuck in the inside of his jacket pockets.
Sure, and where would you carry? It's always a problem when you're on the airplane. Where do you put your glasses, your cell phone, your keys, your passport? Now, can you imagine carrying that kind of cash and all those things?
Yeah, well, and keep in mind too, guys, you
Their
guys remember
blazers
this.
were custom sewn
Airports
pop-ups.
back in, yeah, yeah. Airports back in the day, you could fly up to the front door of the airport 5, 10 minutes before the flight and zip up to the gate. Nowadays, I don't think you could get through with money stuck in your pockets like that. But countless amounts of money, countless. Because even today, by the way, so when you go up to the craps table, 21 table or something, as you guys know, they'll take your money and stick it into that count box, whatever you want to call it. So there was no way to track how much money was going in and out of the hands of underworld figures.
It's just a fun question to pose.
It is, and the skim, of course, is on top of whatever they were getting from their points in the casino legitimately. I mean, these guys had front men that were getting the profits,
Sure.
And the taxes were paid, but it still came back to the various outfit figures. So the skim was just the free money, the tax-free money. I would like to talk for a minute about, you hear about John Gotti being the Teflon Don, but I think that Tony Spilotro deserves that a lot more than John Gotti. Wasn't he indicted over and over and over again, and he walked away every single time? He was never convicted of anything with regard to Las Vegas, was he?
Had a good attorney, Oscar Goodman, who later became the mayor of Las Vegas. No, he was killed. He was in the middle of legal action when he and his brother were killed. There would have been trials and ongoing. No, he, which gets back, by the way, I know we're almost out of time, but there are so many good stories, and you guys are telling them. I think the untold story, a lot of focus on Gotti, a lot of focus on New York. I think there's so much more to be told about Chicago, and you guys are telling the Chicago story. I think in a lot of ways, especially as you said, west of the Mississippi, LA, Phoenix, Las Vegas, the dog tracks, everything. I think there's so much that Chicago had control of that you guys are doing a great job of telling. And I think there are so many more good. I'd love to see more movies about Chicago.
There sure is a lot to tell, even with the Las Vegas connection. And we touched on it, but didn't even go into the Cal Neva and Marilyn Monroe being there with Giancana, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., all of this going on in Nevada. Sinatra, so many stories that have been touched on, but there are books and films that really need to be made.
Well, Giancana and the president and Roselli, a close confidant of a confidant of the girlfriend that the president and Sam Giancana were both dating and on. Yeah, there's so much. I think the whole Giancana story and why he was killed and who did it and his involvement with Phyllis McGuire, not just in Las Vegas, Hot Springs, Arkansas, I just think there's so much there. And you guys are telling the story. I think it's so valuable.
Well, there's also a mob museum in Hot Springs. It doesn't really hold a candle to the one in Las Vegas, but it's still there. And it's a big part of the story of that city, too.
It is. Robert Raines does a great job with it. Let me ask you guys, how active is the outfit, organized crime, sort of remnants of that in Chicago? Are people aware in Chicago even of what's could be going on even today?
Not really. And we always stay away from anybody who's still active or living today. There's so much to tell about the past and about people who have left us that we've got a lot to work from. So we stay away from that. And certainly whatever's going on today doesn't really hold a candle to the great peaks of the Chicago outfit in the 70s and 80s, the 50s and 60s. So we're going to stay away from that for the same reasons that Mr. Pileggi stayed away from the names in the movie. We're just going to stay away from that. But we want to thank you very much, Larry Henry. You've been a wonderful guest. We appreciate you giving us a couple episodes of your time. We'd probably like to talk to you again. There's just so much that you have all this knowledge, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for the education, Larry.
Great being with you guys. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I would love to just keep the story going. Fascinating story.
I'm your host, Paul Whitcomb, and this is my good friend Ray Franz. And we are your mobologists, and thank you for joining us for episode 4 of Made Men.